Hello, I'm Callan from Twindera, and today I'll be talking about the most controversial chapter of Love Live All-Stars so far. Chapter 20 marks a rather large turning point for the story, with ramifications that will be felt for the rest of Season 2. My own personal feelings are, the chapter is a mixed bag of good ideas weighed down by some rather questionable execution, in particular hampered by one inclusion to the story. I am not actually opposed to Longshu as a character, and her creating her own school idol association. It presents an interesting opportunity for a lot of characters involved, both the old and the new. A chance for them to define their meaning of what it is to be a school idol. The idea of splitting the groups in two is a status quo game changer that becomes a battle of ideology. That's such a bold move for the franchise to take. Who is right? Longshu, with her new, professional, and idealised image of a school idol, or the School Idol Club's older, raw, and soul-filled take on school idols? It also allows for more of the other members to get a chance in the spotlight. In the first season, if you weren't a Yumu, Setsuna, or Shioriko, you were usually delegated to the background, offering the occasional line when it was their turn to speak. So the idea is very good on paper, but there is one issue that is included in the chapter that negatively affects this, which is the ban on the original School Idol Club. Banning of their club room, banning of their school idol activities, banning of being able to even perform, including people being stationed around the school to prevent them from practicing from what they love. This is the biggest problem, because this one action taints the rest of the chapter and makes everyone in the association unintentionally unsympathetic. It makes Longshu seem needlessly cruel and tyrannical, while Shioriko is rendered a powerless bystander, losing any agency her character had earned from the first season, reduced to just watching the events unfold and playing damage control. While Ai and Karen's individual motives make complete sense for their characters, their decision to side with Longshu makes them by extension subscribing to her way of thinking. The scene where they are smiling and acting as if nothing has changed makes them appear particularly callous. The fact that they are standing next to the very same people that they are helping to suppress with their regime and acting buddy-buddy makes them come off as particularly apathetic to the original club's plight. Karen talks about how they can push each other as rivals, but how can they do this in the current situation? The original group can't train or perform, so how will this help both sides improve? Ayumu and Setsuna both talk about being motivated by Ai and Karen's improvements, but again, they aren't allowed to do anything until they join the association, at which point they won't be rivals, and how can they push each other then? I get the feeling that the story wants to be complex and look at both sides, but this feels one step too far. Karen also talks about how much she loves them, how they could never be replaced, but how can she say these things when her new group creates an impromptu live to intentionally disrupt the old group's only chance at performing? It's just weird that they would even seem able to talk to them without feeling any form of remorse or guilt. They don't even seem to be attempting to encourage Longshu to drop the ban and are fine with the current status quo, which is just madness to me. One change I think that would have helped this chapter immensely is that the two groups simply coexist from the start. Longshu builds her school idol association separately but does not disband the old club, and instead she simply invites them to check it out and subtly lures them to join, as she is still trying to do in the original. Over time, members of the original club will become interested in this new take on school idols and become drawn in by the fancy facilities, expensive equipment, and professional trainers. This pretty much keeps the original plotline intact. Longshu would still be portrayed as a complex but antagonistic force that goes more in line with her just wanting what is best for them. It would also make Ai and Karen look less like jumping a sinking ship and generally choosing this path for themselves. The original club draws less and less of a crowd at their lives, and as people are more interested in this new shiny group, over time they can't keep up with Longshu's much grander lives and are fairly forgotten by the time of Yu's return. I feel that this one change would fix most of the chapter's issues. Of course, you would have to rewrite the bit with the gorilla lives. Now, I actually really like the idea of Shizuku wanting to discover the difference between the old group and the new one, challenge her own perceptions of a school idol. Her choosing of her own free will is a good agenda for the character, but again her choice is tainted by the ban. She is willingly siding with someone who is oppressing the people she just left. If the groups were allowed to coexist, with Longshu's group only currently having the edge in terms of perception by the general populace, this would feel much more earned at the end of the chapter. Now, forgetting the ban for a moment and ignoring their lack of empathy for their friends, I think Ai and Karen joining the association is good in theory. Karen's always been more competitive than the rest, and Ai is always friendly to everyone. It allows us to see them in a different environment and lets them expand on their characters, which hadn't been seen much in the first season. I do wish that they had gone more into their reasoning. even showing them join the group, as it would have smoothed out a lot of people's issues with them. I was actually rather disappointed with Shioriko's departure from the group. While yes, she had only been with them for a short time, and yes, Longshu is her childhood friend, but the fact that she had only just joined them makes it a little bit worse for me. After so many chapters of her slowly building a bond with the club, to her lowering her guard, taking the plunge into school idols, it's rendered numb by her leaving the group as soon as she had joined it. She didn't even really get to have much of an interaction with the other members, which would have made her departure have more impact. So let's get to Longshu herself, and for the most part, Longshu is a fascinating character. It's definitely a unique take on a Love Live character. She had been brought up with no one ever telling her no, and has always had her ego stroked by how perfect she is. She isn't inherently a bad person, but her upbringing has caused her to not really see the feelings of others. She is very upfront, which can cause her to appear incredibly rude. This chapter seems to suggest that she is very generous to her friends, but ruthless to her enemies. Despite this, she does seem to generally believe that what she is doing is best for everyone, and as such, she can't see why others would disagree with her clearly correct opinions. However, my biggest criticism with Longshu's character is the narrative's obsession with how perfect she is, or should I say her performances. Every character, including Kasumi, begrudgingly has to admit how perfect her singing is, how charismatic she captures the audience, how flawless her dancing is. It's not to a Miri Su level, as Longshu has clearly defined flaws, but it's a bit much, isn't it? It's the same with Mia, who is portrayed as this hyper-competent composer who writes 5 chart songs a day. Is this supposed to encourage us to like these characters? Because for me, I feel it does the opposite. It's really off-putting in a character to be this superhuman. Setsuna is the example I will use. She is considered one of the more talented members of the group. Karen in particular sees her as a rival, but it's not like the gap between her and them is so large. They're on a fairly similar level. Can you imagine Setsuna being portrayed like this? With every character stopping to remind us how wonderful she is. Now, this is just a personal preference, but I'm also not a fan of Longshu and Mia's design. This trend started with Shioriko's sister, Kaoruko, and has continued with these two. I just don't think it matches the Love Live aesthetic, and that these character designs fit more with Bang Dream. Now, I don't hate Bang Dream or even that style, it just looks out of place compared to the rest of the girls for me. One of the benefits of this chapter is the more minor members of the group getting a chance to shine. I already mentioned Shizuku, but Emma also gets a small moment that I really appreciate. Emma is normally the composed sweetheart of the group, but here she takes on an almost angry tone to Karen, upset because the Karen she sees should never be reduced to a backup dancer to Longshu. It's a side of Emma we never really see, and I am all here for it. Now, going back to my original point that this is a battle of ideology, the chapter does an absolutely amazing job of introducing that concept. Longshu, while talking to you, talks about how she sees the girls in the school idol club as gems that she can polish. I must admit that when I read that line, I found it very off-putting, like a scientist over a petri dish. Only she can manufacture these girls to be the best. It comes off as more egotistical than I think the writing was intending. From Longshu's words and Yu's inability to respond, I feel you were supposed to in part agree with her, that she has a point, but it comes off as obsessively controlling. Thankfully, the chapter has more nuance than that, because Kasumi stands in opposition of this belief. She is rough and unrefined, and yet it is because of this that she shines. By the end of her conversation with Longshu, Yu is rendered shell-shocked. While she doesn't see Longshu as the invading force that Kasumi sees, she is greatly affected by Longshu's words and comparing herself to Mia. Is she holding them back? Is her songwriting not good enough? Is Longshu right? Shioriko tells her that through her own character development over the course of the first season was in part thanks to her, that she is a better person because of her. Her words help Yu and promises to one day return. Shioriko offers an interesting perspective for both sides, as she seems to prefer the original, but also knows Longshu's temperament and wants to help break through to her childhood friend. Meanwhile, Kasumi is the real MVP of this chapter for me. Having already seen the club disbanded once, she shows absolute loyalty to Yu. When she starts to doubt herself, Kasumi showers her in appreciation and love. The rest of the club also commit to how grateful they are to her and how she truly helped them forge their path. Kasumi spends most of the remaining chapter trying to cheer her up and get the confidence back that she lost. With Longshu having drawn away most of the crowd after their attempt to perform a guerrilla live, Kasumi stands on stage alone, and it is in this moment that really embodies what I love about Kasumi as a character. Even before Longshu, Kasumi felt at a deficit to everyone else in the group. She's not the greatest singer, she's not the best at dancing, she doesn't have the stamina despite trying her best in training. That's even more so with Longshu's arrival. But despite being outmatched in many things she pours her heart and soul out into her speech, standing defiant. The support she receives from you, from the crowd, no matter the number, that is what truly matters. Kasumi doesn't need professionals, fancy equipment, or even a big stage. Kasumi stands on par with Longshu in spite of it. Kasumi doesn't need to be polished or refined because she does that herself each day. Kasumi shines bright like a diamond. It's genuinely my favourite Kasumi moment, and I have this chapter to thank for it. You who admits to feeling depressed after her talk with Longshu, this live helps ease her mind and realises to them this is what a school idol is. It is also this performance that inspires Shizuku to seek out the association, as she wants to understand the difference between the two, leading to the end of the chapter and her departure. Now, despite my grievances with the chapter, I believe there is a lot of potential with this storyline. While the ban causes a lot of unintentional issues, such as Longshu's taking one step too far into tyranny, the overall message is solid. I don't believe the writer's intention was to split the fanbase or ruin characters. While some things could have been explained better or ironed out, the concept is enticing enough to be considered worth exploring. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble about Love Live. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Any comments are always welcome, as we love to read responses and enjoy interacting with our viewers. Until next time, goodbye!